3 o'clock. All right, so I'm a minute or two late. It's been a busy day. We just got back from New York where we were visiting, and they tell you not to walk in New York. That's why they have buses. Anyway, today's episode is about empathy. Empathy is being able to walk a mile in another man's shoes, to say, hey, I could have some fun at your expense, but maybe I'm not going to. Maybe I'm going to and then feel bad about it. That's more like where we are today, because Tom Perriello, who, believe it or not, was one of the most regular guests on my radio show back when he was in Congress, 2009 through 2011, regular. Then he goes to work for George Soros because he loses. And to be fair, Tom Perriello, when he was in Congress, voted for something he knew was going to cost him the election and voted for it anyway. Now, it was horrific and not a very good idea, and it's taken a lot of people and made them very sick and killed a lot of them, and really is the cause of COVID-19. Speaking of Obamacare. But he needed to be the guy, and he fell on his sword. How many Congress people do you know will vote for something that they feel like they have to vote for, whether it's going to cost them their next election or not? Kind of wish he had thought about that, not voted for Obamacare to bring it to the floor, but he was that tie-breaking vote. So Tom Perriello is back. He wants to be congressman again. He wants to run against John McGuire for Virginia's 5th Congressional District. All well and good. He went off after he lost in 2010 to Robert Hurt and became an ambassador, an envoy for the State Department to some of the worst places in sub-Saharan Africa. Just horrible places of abuse and dispiritment and revolution and bloodshed. And so I had to give him some respect. He was constantly there negotiating people who didn't want to be at peace. Probably should have called Donald Trump. Donald Trump seems to do a better job with that than Tom did. But he came back after that posting and went to work for George Soros. And not in the way a lot of people get connected to George Soros, where, George Soros has bags of money to get elected. No. Tom actually ran the Open Society group. He was George's number one guy for many years, until Alex, I guess, bar mitzvahed and was able to take over for himself as family business. So Tom, not having that gig anymore, jumped out and said, well, maybe I'll go back into Congress. So there he is. He's running for Congress again as a Democrat. He's got an interesting primary. Actually has one of the most notable former libertarians running against him, Robert Trzynski, another fellow who used to be by Trump derangement syndrome. A good, thoughtful man. I don't know what kind of Democrat he's like, but we might get a chance to find out. You see, Tom smartly is out there looking for every possible vote he can get. That's what you do when you run for office. So Friday of last week, he holds a meet and greet, coffee klatch, grip and grin. They have all sorts of nicknames for these things in political circles. And it was a local establishment in Charlottesville, hosted by the Democratic Socialists of America. You may have heard of them. They're all the rage now. CNN just published a poll saying that 1/3 of all Democrat voters that they surveyed self-identified, is that the word we should use, as a Democratic Socialist. 1/3. Well, you do enough vote suppression, that's enough to win an election hands down. So Tom smartly goes off to visit with these Democratic Socialists of Charlottesville, one of the older Democratic Socialist parties in America. They actually managed to get the mayor of Charlottesville elected years ago, back in the heyday of 2017, and melting down statues and Lord only knows what else. Oh, I know what else, but most of it was consumed with melting down statues of other people. So he meets with this group of Democratic Socialists, and you'd think with that kind of gravitas, with the age and heft of this particular Democratic Socialist Party, in this post-Zohran Mamdani world, Tom Perriello would be in his glory. I mean, this was Barack Obama's guy. Barack Obama came to Charlottesville 2 times to campaign for Tom Perriello. Trust us, some people are still caught up in the traffic that started. And there's Tom, talking the good talk, having a great time, big rounds of applause and everything else. And the event comes to a conclusion, and the press is there to cover him. A couple of local TV stations and a couple of local reporters, most of them ready to doe-eyedly say, "Oh, Tom, what wonderful things do you want to do for us this time?" So they line up to start doing the press gaggle after the event. And this is when the interesting stuff starts happening. Tom's campaign staff hustles him over to another part of the event space, away from any of the signs that say Democratic Socialists of America, and wouldn't allow any of the party members to be seen in any of the shots with Tom. They weren't taking any group photos. There was no everybody get together and we'll have a big smile and have the dozen or so communists in Charlottesville get together for a group shot. No, stay away from the candidate. And they tried to make it out that they didn't want this to distract from the campaign event. Funny that you're in Charlottesville, Virginia, a place where I think there is an argument to be made that Democratic Socialists are the conservative ones. And you don't want your candidate to be seen with them. Why? Well, I mean, the obvious political case is south of Charlottesville, even the Democrats don't like the Democratic Socialists, mostly because they're from Charlottesville. So trying to win a big congressional district with 800,000 people, most of them legal citizens, is tough enough. And then to be seen cozying up to the Zohran Mamdani crowd, that's not going to carry you across the finish line. So this is where Tuesday's primary becomes interesting. This has gotten a lot more press than his handlers probably would have hoped that it would. That's okay. That's what the press is supposed to do, isn't it? Isn't it? So it's getting a lot more press and a lot more coverage than Tom Perriello's handlers wanted it to, and probably a lot more press than it would have gotten had they just let the damn pictures be taken. Because who was going to ask Tom about being seen with the Democratic Socialists in Charlottesville? It's hard not to be seen with Democratic Socialists in Charlottesville. But by making sure that none of the Democratic Socialists could be seen in any pictures with their candidate, they've made it a story. So here's the question. Does this cost Tom the primary? He's got all the money. He's got all the name recognition. Well, he's one of only 2 out of the 3 candidates that are actually bona fidely a Democrat. do the Democratic Socialists of America stay home because Tom doesn't want to be their candidate? Do they vote for one of the other two candidates because Tom doesn't want to be their candidate? Or do they hold their nose and vote for the establishment guy? Ask New Yorkers how that happens. It doesn't. And, you make your choices. You pay your fare and you ride your ride. Tom's campaign people made a calculation that insulting the Democratic Socialists of America was a good campaign strategy, and it might be in November, but you got to get to November 1st. I don't know if he'd take a meeting with Hasan Piker or not, but I know James Carville doesn't want to have anything to do with any Democratic Party that Hasan Piker is part of. Now, here's where the empathy comes in. I'm not supposed to, by caricature, say anything that would even remotely sound like understanding for Tom's plight. But in 2017, I was there. We were here in Charlottesville during those riots when Nikia Walker, the Democratic Socialist mayor of Charlottesville, was trying to melt down everybody's statue. I mean, I think she would have melted down a statue of Martin Luther King if she would have had a chance. I think she was getting a group discount. So there was this group called Unite the Right. Unite the right. Who could be against uniting the right? We need to unite. Otherwise, we'll never beat the left. And so I went and I met with some of these folks from Unite the Right and discovered pretty quickly they weren't conservatives. So I began referring to them as Unite the Unicorns, because it was just as likely you were going to find unicorns in their organization as you were conservatives. And I was proven to be right. I mean, they ran off to the Ukraine after the riots of 2017 to avoid extradition. I mean, to relax and recoup their energy, hanging out with their buddies in the Azov battalion, Hunter Biden and all those folks. So I understand, because they dragged me into their mad dimension. That's me winking. That was the web address or the blog or whatever that this failed poet who used to run the Unite the Right folks called his writing, or whatever it was. Hey, Hitler thought himself to be an artist too, so why wouldn't Charlottesville's Nazis be failed poets and whatnot? They're sensitive souls. So I have empathy for Tom, because these folks wanted me to be dragged into their mad dimension. And I wouldn't let it happen. And I received threats. I received threats in person. I received threats on the air. I actually started carrying my weapon into the radio station because I wasn't sure somebody wasn't going to try to do something at 3 o'clock in the morning in an empty parking lot on my way in to do my morning radio show. That's how concerned I was about how unhinged some of these people were. And having been around conservatives for a long time, I can tell you something. They don't get unhinged, especially when you don't listen to them. They just don't vote for you, which is going to be the interesting thing. Does that happen to Tom Perriello? Does he get the big L? And where does he go from there? Does he go back to George Soros? I mean, I'm sure George has something in the mailroom that he could do. But I feel for him, because I've been there. When groups that you don't want to be part of, like in Tom's case, the Democratic Socialists of America, want to insist you're one of them what's a good Democrat to do? So we'll see how this turns out on Tuesday. If you haven't voted yet in Virginia's primaries, it's your last day to do it. You're going to have to do it in your regular voting places. And on the subject of bravery and standing up to danger and perilous situations, since we're sort of on that subject, because that's what it would really take for a politician to tell a group of people, really don't want your votes. Or find a way to say, I really want your votes, but I'm not going to listen to you. And to be fair, back in 2010, 2008, when Tom ran the first time, he used to go to Tea Party meetings. Tea Party. So he was able, think about that for a second. Tom Perriello, a Democrat that's such a Democrat, he winds up working for George Soros until Alex is old enough to get the keys to the family car, would come and talk to the Taxed Enough Already party, but didn't want to be seen with the Democratic Socialists of America. Brah. I mean, that's Aaron go, brah. But on the subject of bravery, as we still have a little time left here on our constitutional hashtag, take a walk. And we all need to take a walk. This is me in Maha. A young fella named Salinas in Idaho is going to, or has already faced some dangerous circumstances. Pulled up to an In-N-Out Burger to see people running, and then sensing trouble, sees and hears somebody shooting a rifle. So he gets his legally owned pistol out of his car and confronts the guy. And his shots, along with the shots of an off-duty state trooper, stop the guy from shooting into the restaurant and cause him to run away, where, of course, with all the bravery one of these mass shooters have, he took his own life. Didn't even leave a manifesto. What kind of shooters are we raising these days? Can't you say to ChatGTP, hey, could you write me a manifesto? Anyway, so this Salinas kid in Idaho is already the lunch special. You've got people writing stories about, we don't know if people were injured because he started shooting haphazardly and all these mischaracterizations, and they haven't even really started yet in on this kid. You're going to start hearing stories about his childhood. You'll get some ex-girlfriend. Who knows, what they'll dredge up. They do it to politicians all the time. But politicians, you ask for it. You want to be in the House of Representatives or the Senate. So when you stand up for it, you're sort of buying into this idea that you're going to be the lunch special. This kid did nothing more than try to save lives, and now he's going to be the lunch special this week for every gun-grabbing governor of Virginia or New Jersey. Even though he's exactly the example of the Second Amendment we should all be talking about. The guy who runs towards the trouble when trouble happens. Because I've said this to some controversy, and I've talked to law enforcement officers who agree with me. When the excrement hits the air handler, we're online now, right? I can say when the shit hits the fan. I just get caught saying that because, we're on the radio and I can't say when the shit hits the fan on the radio. But when the shit hits the fan, we are the first responders in this constitutional republic. We're the ones who are supposed to run in and stop something, whether it's in Twin Falls, Idaho, or the Bataclan. Remember the shooting in France, the Bataclan? A couple of guys that were caught inside the bar. I think it's trying to tell me this is going to be an interesting edition of our Constitutional. Why does Joe look like he's getting rained on? So we have to be those first responders. And as we approach the 25th anniversary of September 11th, a quick note, I'll be doing this as well as my radio show from Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the place where we give honor to those Americans who did that, who said, you know what, we can do something about this one, and they did. And we have to remember that when the shit hits the fan, we are the first responders. Please take a walk. If you're watching in Virginia, please go vote Tuesday, and we'll take another Constitutional tomorrow.